Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness has appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of important trust in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and a faithful manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our church. Amen. Thank you. Honorable members, welcome to the sitting of today, Wednesday, the 5th day of April, 2023. Clerk, just confirm that we have the requisite quorum to transact today's business.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the House is not quorate.
There being no quorum to commence the business of the day, I direct that pursuant to Standing Order 36, the quorum bell be rung for an initial 10 minutes or until such a time that the quorum shall be achieved.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the House is not quorate.
Quorum having been confirmed, we proceed with the business of the day. First order.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
No communication from the chair.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, statements. Order number 8, motions and bills. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have a motion to be moved by Honorable Peter Denji Kirega, the Chairperson, Special Funds Accounts Committee.
Very well. Honorable Peter Denji Kirega, Chairperson, Special Funds Accounts Committee and member for Ruriye Ward. Welcome. And you look very smart, Honorable Denji. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this chance. I'll just go direct to the report, to the motion. Mr. Speaker, sir, Section 116, bracket 7 of the 2012 states that the administrator of the fund, not later than 3 months after the end of the financial year, prepare accounts for the fund for each financial year. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, the administrator should submit the financial statement to the financial year to the Auditor General and the respective county assembly. In adherence to the cited section and compliance with the provisions of the Standing Order 193 bracket B, the financial statement for the County Emergency Fund, Annexed 1, bracket, we are tabled on the floor of the House and accordingly referred to the Committee on Special Funds Accounts for examination and preparation of the report thereof. Mr. Speaker, sir, for the purpose of this exercise and to ensure the compliance of the well-detailed report, the committee terms or reference as ratified in the committee meeting were as follows. 1. Scrutiny of the annual report and the financial statements to identify the gray areas. Request of the information from the CECM, Finance, the Economic Planning and ICT on the utilization of the emergency fund. 3. The examination of the reports submitted by the department. Holding the meeting with the CECM to get information on the gaps derived from the financial statements and the submitted reports. 5. To submit to the House a report on analysis of the reports as well as recommendations on further actions. Mr. Speaker, sir, subsequent to various committee meetings to scrutinize the annual report and financial statements, the committee through the Office of the Clerk sent letters to the same Finance, Economic Planning and ICT requesting the following: the bank statements to the fund, the emergency fund cash books, supporting documents of the administrative cost, a breakdown of the list of payables. Number 5, breakdown of the general expenditure, specifying dates, cases, amount utilized, and the supporting documents thereof. And lastly, number 6, that is the bank reconciliation statement. On 24th November 2022, the Office of the Clerk received the documents annexed to and channeled them to the committees for the conclusion. Consequently, a meeting was convened with the officials from the Finance, the Economic Planning and ICT department, in which deliberations on the issues that needed elucidation were held. From the foregoing, the committee came up with these observations, finding and the recommendations as chronicled herein. Mr. Speaker, following the scrutiny of the annual report, the finance statements of the County Emergency Fund for the period under review, as well as the documentation submitted by the CECM, the committee made observations and findings as indicated below. Misinformed financial statement, Mr. Speaker. Under the management discussions and analysis, it was noted that the date of the submissions of the first supplementary budget to the Assembly was not 29th June of 2021 as indicated. In addition to the County Assembly appropriated Kenya shillings 48 million to the fund and not the Kenya shillings 40 million as reported. Further section 14, bracket B or 2, Mr. Speaker, sir, of the Nyandarua County Emergency Fund Regulations 2022 states that the financial statement prepared shall include the following information. A date and the amount of each payment. B, the person to whom the payment was made. C, the purpose for which the payment was made. D, whether the person to whom the payment was made or has been made spent the money for the purpose, a statement made to that effect. E, if the person to whom the payment has been not spent the money for the purpose of the statement specifying the reasons for not having done so. And F, a statement indicating conformity with these regulations. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, after scrutiny, it was noted that the financial statements didn't indicate any of the above listed details, and the committee had to seek for more information from the CECM. 2. Utilization of the fund. During the financial year under consideration, money from the fund was utilized to the endless emergencies relating to fire tragedy, incidences, and road accidents, among others. There down is the tabulation, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I read, there is the tabulation 1, 2, tabulation 3. There is tabulation 4, tabulation 5. There is tabulation even 6, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, after scrutiny of the financial year as well as the documents present by the CECM, it was observed that 1. The medical expense, in some instances, the payments were made directly to the hospitals, while in others, the payments were made to the beneficiaries. This, therefore, calls for questions on the criteria used to make such payments and the validity of whether the fund was utilized for the intended purpose. 2. Administrative expense. It was noted that the administrative costs were understated, as the following amounts drawn from the account had not been reported in the financial statement. Therefore, another small tabulation. Mr. Speaker, sir, the report administrative cost was Kenya shillings 1,372,116. The unreported expense being Kenya shillings 1,430,450. The total administrative cost was Kenya shillings 2,802,566. This being the case, the expenses of the year were 6.2% of the approved fund budget, meeting in the surpassed and set threshold of 3% as provided by the Nyandarua County Emergency Fund Regulation 2022. 3. Eligibility of the expenditure. The County Executive Committee, Mr. Speaker, members may make payments from the emergency fund when satisfied that it fulfills the following requirements of Section 112 of the PFMA 2012. A, there is an urgent and unforeseeable emergency of expenditure for which there is no legislative authority. B, payment not budgeted and cannot be delayed until the latter financial year without harming the generation public interest. C, payment is meant to alleviate to damage, loss, hardship, or suffering which may be caused directly by the emergency. D, the damage caused by the emergency is on a small scale and limited to the county. And E, the unforeseen event is on which threatens to human life or welfare, or threatens damage to the environment. Mr. Speaker, sir, however, after scrutiny of the bank statement, some of the payments made from the emergency fund failed to meet the above criteria as highlighted in the table below. Mr. Speaker, sir, after consultation with the CECM, the finance on the same, the committee was informed that the funds spent on the construction works and were utilized after the cabinet approved the incidences as urgently, while those spent on the conferencing and allowances were utilized during the amendment of the emergency fund regulations. In regard to this, the members were concerned that if strict measures are not put in place, the fund may be open to misuse and political mileage. Number 3, statement of the financial performance. After the scrutiny of the statement of the financial report for the year and the document as submitted by CECM, the committee noted that there were discrepancies in reporting the amount reported as the fund expense. Under the statement, the amount indicated was Kenya shillings 48,643,542, while in note 7, difference figures of Kenya shillings 47,271,426, Mr. Speaker, was reported. Moreover, under the expenditure returns, another amount of Kenya shillings 48,280,351 was reported. This being so, Mr. Speaker, the committee could not establish the correct figures. When queried on this, the officials from the Department of Finance stated that the figures has been erroneously reported, and the actual amount was Kenya shillings 48,643,542 shillings. A statement on of the financial position. Under the statement of the financial position, the following was noted, Mr. Speaker. An amount of Kenya shillings 2,215,880 was reported as trade and other payable from the exchange transactions. However, according to the report submitted by the CECM, the total amount of trade payables was Kenya shillings 2,247,168 shillings. On this, the committee observed that the financial reports were prepared on accrue accounting, while the CECM report was on a cash basis. The discrepancies of Kenya shillings 1,288 was a payment made as taxes. Number 2, the cash and cash equivalents as Kenya shillings as of 30th June 2022 were Kenya shillings 16,534,302 shillings, while the bank statement indicates a difference figures of Kenya shillings 19,432,611.04 cents. On this, committee in this committee, we observed that the financial report were prepared in accordance with the accrued basis of accounting methods under the International Public Sector Accounting Standard. That is the IPSAS. Further, Mr. Speaker, the fund expenses were reported when the expenditure occurred and not after payment was made, hence the discrepancies. Number 5, variance between supporting schedules and financial statements. Mr. Speaker, the committee observed the following variances after doing a comparison of the supporting schedule and the financial statement. There below is another tabulation. The bank saw, this being so, the committee could not sustain the actual amount and questioned the nature in which the fund was utilized. When questioned on the variance, the officials from the finance department reported that the documents contained some typing errors. Mr. Speaker, the typing contains of errors, and the accounts were amended after submissions of the documents to the external auditor. These raised the questions of the accuracy of the figures contained in the documents that are tabled in the House. Mr. Speaker, pending bills, the committee observed that there were pending bills for various financial years as tabulated also below. The PFM regulations stipulated that pending bills should be the first charge in a subsequent budget. It was therefore not clear whether the pending bills from previous years have been paid. On this, the CECM reported that the trade payables were delayed due to the contractor's failures submit some required document. Number 7, item listed in the bank statement and exempted in the financial statement. The committee observed that some funds had been drawn from the bank but not been reported in the financial statement. Check number 600 drawn to the IDs-led grant. IDs-led grant. I think that one was a company. Of Kenya shillings 14,300,000 was not reported in the financial statement. Mr. Speaker, after the consultative meetings with the CECM, members observed that exempted amounts in the financial statements were not contra-entry items. On this, the members were concerned about the repercussions of the funds meant for emergencies being borrowed and used for other activities. Number 8, lack of proof of use of the fund for the intended purpose. The Public Finance Regulation, Section 115, states that the county treasury shall include the financial statement made at a subsection 1 into bracket D, whether the person to whom the payment was made, Mr. Speaker, has spent the money for the purpose, and a statement made to the effect. The scrutiny document, it was noted that there was instances where funds had been paid to individuals, but there were no evidences. That the funds had been spent on the intended purpose as stipulated before. That's another tabulation. Further, the committee noted that some circumstances funds were drawn for the purpose of foodstuff to help vulnerable citizens. However, there was no proof that the said citizens received the said goods as stipulated below. Mr. Speaker, there are some recommendations that was made. Mr. Speaker, sir, after examining the submissions made by the County Executive Committee member, the committee recommends, 1, that in the future the County Executive Committee made for Financial and Economic Planning and ICT should ensure that the financial statement given to the Assembly of the administration of the emergency fund contains precise information on specific amounts that were drawn from the fund and beneficiaries thereof. This will help the committee in verifying the validity of the information given. Number 2, that the fund administrator should ensure that the financial statements are prepared accurately without errors and omission so that they reflect the true positions of the fund. Number 3, that going forward, the county executive committee members for finance, committee planning, and ICT should verify and sustain that the cases presented meet the criteria as required by the law. That the county executive committee member of the finance, economic development, and ICT should always ensure that the approval of the county assembly is sought within 2 months after payment is made from the emergency fund in compliance with the section 114(1) of the PFMA 2012. The committee, on the other hand, should make regular follow-ups to ensure that this is strictly adhered to. Number 5, that in the future, funds drawn in cases of hospitalization should be paid directly to the hospitals for accountability purposes and to ensure there is an effective audit trail. Number 6, that the fund accountant should prepare all finance documents on a true accounting method as envisioned in the PFM Act 2012, Section 116(8), which states that. Number 7, that the county government, Mr. Speaker, departments should ensure the proper planning and budgeting are done to avoid utilization of emergency fund on activities that can be budgeted for. Mr. Speaker, sir, we finally come to number 8, where the fund administrator should ensure the proper disclosures and well-detailed notes that attach to the financial statement to make them more elaborate and informative. Mr. Speaker, we have our conclusions and as the committee. The county emergency fund is instrumental in addressing unforeseen and unappropriated payments, thus alleviating an immediate suffering of the county citizenry, more so the less fortunate. This being the case, the fund should always give us the confidence and the assurance that we are well prepared to face any tragedy that occurs within our boundaries. This being the case, it is a fund whose management and utilization require a lot of transparency, accountability, as well as strict adherence to the relevant laws. However, it is so unfortunate and saddening to learn that from the investigation, the fund was channeled to activities that were outside the legal definition, of that it should take care of. Although the majority of our people have faced calamities of various natures, but never received any assistances that they may deserve. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, sir, the members of the Committee of Special Funds are hopefully that the implementation of the recommendations made in the report will improve the administration of the fund a great deal. Additionally, the committee expects that the executive shall continue to gainfully enhance the county's preparedness regarding the intervention in the local emergencies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Dinji. Honorable members, the motion is duly moved. Just a minute, a bit of confusion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, in view of the report, I call Mheshimiwa Gathilimo to second.
Yes, sir, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the report that belongs to the committee that I belong, the Special Fund Committee, and congratulate my chair, who has been very diligent in mobilizing us as members of the committee to look into issues that were that made this report successful. Mr. Speaker, the emergency fund is the only fund that is provided before spending. That is, it is provided for in the budget, and it is available money on demand. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this is the fund that requires extra vigilance and oversight from this House and from the executive. And from the report, Mr. Speaker, you find a lot of discrepancies that leaves a lot of question. Is this fund safe? Should calamities come, God forbid, are we prepared to handle them? Is there money available? Have we diverted this money to other issues that may not necessarily regarding the definition of emergency be emergency? Mr. Speaker, we have held a lot of meetings with the executive and the concerned department, and the answers we have been receiving, as reported here, Mr. Speaker, you'll see that they are not satisfactory. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is my belief that we shall put strict adherence to the rules that guide this fund. And especially in reporting, we found that there has not been reporting, by monthly reporting, of the usage of this fund. And if there is a fund that can be so vulnerable to misuse, and it is this fund, because this is money that is already there. It is my hope, as my chair reiterated, that the Auditor General shall scrutinize the documents, and if anyone found to have misappropriated this fund that is supposed to relieve our people, our citizenry, from adverse effect of calamities, like fire, like floods, like other tragedies that are not foreseen, then these people must be made to account and must be punished severely. Mr. Speaker, it is on this note that I support this report and urge that any facilitation needed to get more answers that should be made. We request that the facilitation should be given to this particular committee. This is a serious fund that needs a lot of vigilance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Maybe before Commissioner Gashombo you contribute, I wish to propose the question, which is that this House does adopt the report of the Special Funds Accounts Committee on the financial statements of the County Emergency Fund for financial year ended 30th June 2022 as a report of the House, and the recommendations therein as the resolution of the House. Commissioner Kashomba.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I raise to support on the report on the annual financial report on the statement of the county funds that are emergency. Mr. Speaker, the report has been highlighted by my chair. This fund has been allocated is supposed to be appropriated within the law. And Mr. Speaker, in the recommendations that are there, it has been highlighted that the funds that were meant and actually appropriated by the budget committee, it's for the unforeseen calamities. And Mr. Speaker, and it has been said, it has been misused. And that's why, in our recommendation, we have to petition the Minister for Finance and Economic Development that in the future, when spending those funds under the law, that Mr. Speaker, they should come up with a policy and documentation on how the money is spent. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have requested even for the statements, the bank statement on the expenditure. And Mr. Speaker, you would see that the statement that has been brought forward do not relate even to the beneficiaries that are supposed to benefit from that fund. So, Mr. Speaker, if you get to ensure that the beneficiaries are not benefiting from that fund, and there is no clear law on how to sanction the minister, and you see the money is just to be spent, then after spending the money is the time that you come and give us a report. Mr. Speaker, I don't know how that law will be amended so that, Mr. Speaker, that before you spend that money, you need to tell us what are you intending to do as a minister. But you see now the law provides that first you spend the money. You spend the money. So that you tell us how you spend the money. But I believe we need to, first of all, to bring forward. It's okay. But we need also to understand, even if we spend that money, it's okay. How do you spend that fund in that fund? So, Mr. Speaker, and after spending, should the assembly be involved? I believe the assembly should be involved on the expenditures so that we can be able to see whether we can be able to appropriate more funds in future. So, Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell, I want just to echo the statement of my chairman that we need to be more vigilant on how we shall spend the fund. Because if you are given about 60 or 70 million in a financial year, and you see the conduit as an officer or the proprietor, the administrator of that fund, a conduit to steal from the public. And Mr. Speaker, the beneficiary, maybe you have a patient in JM or in North Kingdom Hospital, and he wants those funds to be taken or wired to the hospital. There are no proper mechanisms on how, Mr. Speaker, the funds should be submitted to the hospital. So we are recommending that they should be channeled directly to the hospital, the patient, instead of having those bureaucracies that will come over and maybe sabotage in the way to give out. The financial document has been said under the law, under the County Public Management Act. It is very clear that when you are doing the proper planning and also the budgeting, Mr. Speaker, you have to come up with a financial statement on how you have accrued the funds for better utilization. So, Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell, we are appealing to the county treasury that in future, if they are to spend this fund that is emergency, they should highlight, they give us the bank statements, they give us the financial reports on the audited funds, so that, Mr. Speaker, as an assembly, the funds that are meant for the poor should benefit those deserve to benefit. So with those few remarks, I want to support this report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Ibra. Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the motion and the recommendation of this committee. Mr. Speaker, as I support, the executive should come up with post-mitigation strategies for these emergency cases. In fact, like I have seen, they have utilized a lot of money on payment of medical bills to private hospitals, where these funds, if they do the mitigation, post-mitigation, you can imagine they are paying a lot of medical bills to a private hospital like North Kinangop, which is in this county, where we have a hospital that can cater for the same services like JM, engineer, our funds to private hospitals. If the same services can be, they are able to get the same services in our hospitals. The funds that they are paying out can also be utilized to raise our hospital to proper standards. They have also been paying for fire tragedies. If they do the mitigation in advance, is there need of waiting for our people to be affected with fires? Well, we can be having fire agents within the wards and sub-counties so that a lot of these cannot be going out only for just like paying for after the tragedies. In fact, out of their recommendations, it has come clear that this House has to look for the policy regulations gapping that require to be done so that in future these funds can be utilized for the real specific tragedies within the county. And I therefore support this motion, and it's my prayer that the relevant committees, out of the recommendation from this committee, they are able to look for various policy gapping, and we come up with a proper and a good regulations that we can be able to be doing a proper oversight on these funds. I therefore support this, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Ibra. Honorable Kongo, member for Wanjohi.
Mr. Speaker, first I want to commend the committee for good work. I also want to contribute to this because it's a very serious report as far as I'm concerned as the chairman budget. Mr. Speaker, one thing you are going to notice that the PFMA Act requires that whenever the CCM finance utilize monies on emergencies, they are supposed to report to the Assembly within 60 days for appropriation by the Budget Committee. Mr. Speaker, all this report and all this money that has been used, the 48 million, in the last financial year, according to this statement, were never appropriated by the Assembly. So the CCM finance utilized money illegally. Because at no any time a report was brought in this Assembly after utilization for us to scrutinize, to appropriate accordingly, Mr. Speaker. The other thing that I have noted from the report, I've seen the committee have commented and said that there is a regulation, Nyandarua emergency regulation, emergency fund regulation of 2022. Mr. Speaker, I have never seen that. I didn't see in 2022 that regulation being tabled in this assembly. So I beg to question whether there is that kind of a regulation. Mr. Speaker, and I seek and I pray through your office, we would like to know whether there was such a regulation that was tabled in this assembly, whether it was approved by this assembly, because I have never seen it myself and it was never discussed in this assembly. And I know the table office and the like, they can prove me right or wrong whether that regulation was passed by this assembly. And if it was not passed, what happens then? What happens then, Mr. Speaker? Because as a chairman budget, I am seeing this regulation being quoted that it requires 3% of the budget. But it has never come forth to us, even in the budget, to know that we are supposed to provide 3% of the budget to emergency fund, Mr. Speaker. So there are very serious questions on the way. For example, I'm seeing them state that they are supposed to be an administrator. Who is the administrator of Nyandarua emergency fund today? Who is the administrator? Is it CCM Finance, CCM Finance, or who is it? Secondly, who approves emergencies? For example, Mr. Speaker, I have seen people who have benefited from emergencies on medical expenses. What was the criteria? Because the people who are given here are not the only people who are sick during that financial year in Nyandarua. There were so many people who are sick. So when you are approving a medical expense, what is the criteria for approving a medical expense? Because there are so many people in this county who have been admitted in the hospital in the year 2021. Why didn't they not benefit and some benefited? I can see some people who have benefited because their houses were ripped off by the weed. How many houses were ripped by the weed in the year 2021? How did it come that 3 or 4 people benefited and there were so many others who did not benefit? And these are the issues that are supposed to be addressed by the regulation that I'm saying. It has never seen the right of this assembly. We don't know whether it is there. And I can believe and strongly believe there was none. And I have inside information to believe that there was not such a thing. It was something that was sat down there by the previous cabinet, did some few memos within the cabinet, and they said that they have a regulation. Mr. Speaker, I think this is a matter, and I will be coming later with another report to ask the CCM Finance to table that regulation in this assembly so that we can be able to scrutinize it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Wanjohi. Maybe the clerk, you can confirm to my office whether the regulation as raised by Honorable Kongo was ever tabled in this house, correct? Thank you. Oh, Honorable Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I like to support the motion by the Committee on Special Fund and the recommendation therein, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, noting that in Nyandarua County we have a problem. The so-said we call emergency fund, Mr. Speaker, always it is said to be a roadside declaration. And Mr. Speaker, as Honorable Kongo has alluded, Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that we may be having maybe a policy in court which is being used without the approval of this assembly. Mr. Speaker, we do understand that by the end of the last financial year, last year when we were having an election, some of the policies were hurriedly pushed to the assembly when the assembly was not within its sittings. So, Mr. Speaker, I do understand if there was such policies which were brought to this assembly and never approved by this assembly, Mr. Speaker, they need to be brought back so that we can pass them, so that, Mr. Speaker, we can be able to understand who is the so-called administrator of this fund. Why is this fund, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, maybe Honorable Kashamba and the company consulting law terms.
Why is this the so-called emergency fund, Mr. Speaker, is mostly used on medical expenses? Mr. Speaker, do we have a committee which sits down and evaluate the state to or the point of a disease so that they can be able to see on how much they can be able to fund? The others I'll fire, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you can go through this file, this list, you get there is a beneficiary who got 100,000 and another person from the same fire tragedy got 10,000. And Mr. Speaker, because these things look more political, because we don't have the policy in place, Mr. Speaker, I would request to urge this House that it's good we ask the executive. It's high time they provide the policy guiding the disbursement of the emergency fund, Mr. Speaker, so that we can understand the modalities they use, such that, Mr. Speaker, those money won't be kept in a coffer only for the benefit of the governor or the executive, Mr. Speaker. It's supposed to benefit across the county. But you get that. Mr. Speaker, I've seen that there is somewhere a certain contractor did a road. How many roads were swept in Nyandarua, Mr. Speaker? Which reason can the executive table to this House that forced them to do that road vis-a-vis the other one? So, Mr. Speaker, as the committee has given us this vote, Mr. Speaker, it is good and worthy to note that the executive need to table a policy so that, Mr. Speaker, or the guidelines, so that we can know how this fund is used. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, without much ado, I do support.
Honorable Jeffrey Kamona, member for Gadara. And chairman, you're chairman of which committee?
The strongest committee in this assembly, the Committee of Implementation.
Committee on, and I think that is the only committee that has the mandate of summoning the CCs, correct?
Correct, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the Committee of Special Funds, where I'm a member. I sincerely want to thank our chairman, Honorable Denji, member for Rori Ward. And Mr. Speaker, I want to inform this House that though we have the report, is that it is a report that from inception, we had a lot of difficulties doing it because of many things. Some of those difficulties came from that the committee did not have a lot of information on finances or even the accounts, because predominantly the committee has to do things to do with money. And it is for this reason, once we have been requesting that the committee needs a lot of training so that we can be able to look at these things. But nonetheless, we are able to have a look at these reports because we are lucky that some of us in the committee had some knowledge to an extent that we are able to interrogate the finance department of the county executive, and we are able to see that we can be able to look at what they were doing. We are able to detect the discrepancies that were there, and we even wondered how some of simple discrepancies could come to pass, though they were able to rescue themselves by saying that they had been able to correct before it went to the Auditor General. But in a snapshot, I want to say that we were able to see that this is an executive kind of fund, and there is no enough oversight. And how I request this assembly should be given more powers to have a look at what is happening. I don't think it is fair for a ward administrator or a sub-county administrator, for that case, to prepare business for this fund and submit it to maybe the cabinet sitting to an extent that it has the approval without the member of the county assembly knowing what is happening from the cloud, because that is what has been happening. Can you, Honorable Speaker, imagine that this is a fund that even has been drawn money to cater for other counter emergencies like obligations, maybe to undertake some registration or to undergo some account opening for purposes of grants from abroad or from donors, and that there is no preparations for such in the budget, or even we don't have residue to do the same. But I want to say that from the committee, when we were able to meet with the executive or the finance department, they also reiterated a lot that there is a lot of glaring gaps in the regulations. And you know the regulations that we are using currently is that of 2015. And they were able to say that they have now another regulation that they have been able to look at all the loopholes, though we can also have an intelligence and help them even look for more loopholes that we can be able to curb. And I wish to concur with the Honorable Congo member of Wajohi that most probably these regulations, the proposal for the regulations for the emergency fund regulation 2022 has not come to this assembly. So we request that we be facilitated to have a look at all those things that are happening, and we move with the speed, and we be able to bring them to the front of the house so that they can be part, and maybe moving forward from next year as we propose or as we have the financial budget for the year 2023, 2024, from the onset we can have now the regulations that can be able to cover these things. Mr. Speaker, as I sit down, I wish to kindly request you that you can have a look at what you can do to facilitate this committee. Can you imagine that we are not even able to understand our like payable, where we have the trade payables or the receivables for that matter? It is good that we be facilitated at least to have the basic financial and accounting principles so that we can be able to undertake this business, which is very important. You know, we have other business for the car loans and mortgages that is not included in this, and at least within a short time we'll be able to bring such report, and members can be able to have a look at it and see their positions. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Kamona, for those kind remarks. The chair undertakes that the committee will be duly facilitated.
Point of information.
Who is that? What is that? Oh, minority whip.
I rise as a member of delegated committee. The issue in question about the regulations, we are on that issue as the committee because there was a regulation in 2017 which has been amended in 2022, and we are in fact engaging the executive to come up with already approved regulations. So on that issue, we are handling it on that level as per our yesterday's meeting. This information to the House.
So meaning the regulation as raised by Honorable Kuku, it was never presented in this House?
Mr. Speaker, in fact, we have to commend this House now because the previous assembly, there is information that this was forwarded to the previous House when there were a lot of...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order.
Yes, what is the point of order, Honorable Kongo?
I think Honorable Ifura is not in order to say that the previous House was given this report and never looked at it. Mr. Speaker, there is you can track
point of clarification
of reports, how they are received from the executive and how they are supposed to be tabled in this assembly. Within your office, Mr. Speaker, is my prayer that you track whether that, on what date was that amendment or that regulation was brought to this assembly, was it received by the clerk, and was it tabled to this assembly?
Point of clarification.
Yes, yes. As you proceed, when a member is on a point of order, you first wait to finish, then you give, you clarify. Just proceed and clarify now.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I did confirm that it was forwarded. It's only that we are also on the same issue trying to get what happened because there's a draft regulations for 2022 that amended the regulations of 2017. So because it's a live issue within our committee, I think we'll also table a report on the same.
Thank you. So you are confirming that the matters of regulation is a matter under deliberation or consideration?
Yes.
Okay. I reiterate my earlier direction. The office of the clerk, you can confirm whether those regulations were ever tabled or what is the position. So, there being no, I now wish to put the question that this House does adopt the report of the Special Funds Accounts Committee on the financial statements of the County Emergency Fund for financial year ended 30th June 2022 as a report of the House and the recommendations therein as the resolution of the House. May those of a similar opinion say aye. May those of a contrary opinion say nay. And the ayes have it. Clerk, next order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, we've exhausted the business as indicated in the morning session's order paper.
Honorable members,